Start recording, and I'm going to, so we'll get started. Good evening, and thank you for all joining us tonight. It looks like we've got about 36 people on, and we usually get a few more as we get started. We are recording this program, and we'll post it to our YouTube channel later this week. My name is Christina Culp. I'm the director of Marsh. We are a chapter of the North Carolina Wildlife Federation. In the Marvin area of Union County. So we work around the zip code 28173. But we like to talk to everybody, so it doesn't matter if you're in our zip code or not. Our mission is to engage our community and educate them about the benefits of restoring and protecting wildlife habitats. And if you live in this area or probably anywhere in this country, you're living in a construction zone most likely, and that is not conducive to wildlife habitat. So we're trying to do the best we can to balance it. If you're a member of the North Carolina Wildlife Federation or become one in the future, you can select Marsh, that's M-A-R-S-H, as the donor chapter affiliation, and our group will receive half of your membership fee. That's a nice thing that allows us to continue to provide programs like this one and other things that we're hoping to do in the future. Also, if you'd like to consider joining the Marsh Planning Group, our main focus is providing educational opportunities like this and hopefully some others in real life very soon. And the more people that we have on that planning group, the more opportunities we can provide. So if you would be interested in that, please send an email to marshforwildlife@gmail.com, and Leanne's going to post that in the chat box. And let us know what you're interested in. We don't meet very often, a couple of times a year, several times a year. Before I introduce tonight's guest, let me remind you about next month's speaker and topic. On April the 27th at 6:30 p.m. again, Annie Howell will join us on Zoom to discuss attracting pollinators to your yard, the non-bird type of pollinators. She'll focus on butterflies, moths, and insects, other insects. She is an experienced master gardener in Union County, and she's our resident within the master gardener community, our resident expert on all things insect related. And I know she's got lots of great photos and information to share with us because I've seen some of it. And I mean, she's just got some great photographs that she's taken in her own yard. So if she can, we can get all of those things to come to our yard too. Tonight's presentation is focused on a favorite animal, though, in our environment. I think everybody loves birds. It's kind of like saying you don't like ice cream unless you're lactose intolerant. And Carol Buie-Jackson is with us tonight to show us how to bring birds to our yard. And more than that, really, we were just talking about some of the issues with the pine siskins, and so she's going to get into some details about how to keep your bird feeders clean and which food to feed at which times, and you can be really simple about it or get a little bit more complicated about it, and she knows all of those things. Carol is the owner of Wildology and the Birdhouse on the Greenway, which are two local bird stores they're local, so they're in the area. And I think it's safe to say that she is wild. I thought this was cute. Wild about birds. Isn't that cute? Yeah. No one's ever said that about you, I'm sure. Because when she sent me her bio, she said she's one of the fortunate people that gets to spend her work and her free time doing the things that she loves, which is dealing with birds. So, and I think you said, and tourism too. So even if one day you get to go on a trip again, you're going to go look for some birds, I guess. She's
That's
also
correct.
the co-founder of the local hawk chapter, which is like Marsh, but in the Matthews area. And I believe that was the first North Carolina Wildlife Federation in the area, right? A chapter in the area.
We're just celebrating our 15th year.
Wow.
I can't believe it. Yes.
That is impressive. That really is. She was also the first female board chair of the North Carolina Wildlife Federation, which, long story, but that's a big deal. And she's also a board member of the National Wildlife Federation, and recently, because she doesn't have anything else to do, started the Women in Conservation Leadership Group in Charlotte. So, birds are just not enough. There's got to be more, I guess. Anyway, so please add your questions to the chat box and keep your line muted if you don't mind. And I'm going to mute mine too because I've got a dog back here playing with a squeaky toy. Can't really control that at all. And we will deal with questions at the end. She'll give us a couple of, hopefully 15 minutes or so to deal with questions. And remember, this is recorded and we'll post it on YouTube in about a week. So thank you for joining us. And Carol, take it away.
All right, thank you so much. And yes, and just to give a plug for the Women in Conservation Leadership, we had to stop because of COVID, but we're going to start meeting again, and we're going to combine it with more fun things and doing them outside. So we're working on getting a plant ID walk scheduled for April. So if anybody is interested in learning more about that, get in touch with Christina because she's part of our group as well. So thank you so much for coming. And yes, what I do for a living, what I do for fun. When Jay, my husband, and I travel, we're very focused on birds, and so I'm one of the lucky ones that gets to work in my passion. So I'm going to pour through a presentation tonight. I know that y'all had a lot of information last week for those of you, or last month for those of you who joined, about creating a habitat. And part of this is going to be repetitious, but it's worth hearing again. So I am going to share my screen. I will disappear on you guys, and Christina is going to moderate the questions. So we'll have plenty of times to at the end to answer your question. So hang on and let me get my presentation set up here. All right, there we are. As she said, I own 2 bird stores, Birdhouse on the Greenway and Wildology. But tonight I'm here as part of the North Carolina Wildlife Federation and the National Wildlife Federation. And if you want birds to your yard, just like all the other wildlife meant to attract to your yard, the 4 main ingredients are food, water, shelter, and places to raise young. And I'm going to talk through each of these elements tonight. You're going to feel like you're drinking from the fire hose, but again, we'll have time at the end to talk about it. A 5th element that I add is sustainable gardening practices. I'm a master composter. Composting is near and dear to my heart. I feel it's the best thing you can do for your garden. It will help you recycle the material that comes out of your garden so you don't have to put it at the curb. And it will also allow you to reduce the amount of chemicals that you use in your garden. And that, if you really want to do one thing good for birds and other wildlife, and that is reduce the amount of chemicals, organic or not, that you use in your garden. Another excellent thing you can do for birds, and I know that I own a bird store and I sell bird seed, but again, the best thing you can do for birds is to go native. Plant with native plants, because native plants sustain the ecology in your backyard. And I did not understand that whole concept until I read a book by Dr. Doug Tallamy, and he explained to me in the book that native plants spend all of their time soaking up the energy from the sun and making it available to the rest of the food web through their leaves and limbs. And like I say, I was setting up a camera to talk about birdhouses, and I noticed that the parents, the birds coming in and out, feeding those young, they weren't feeding any of the seeds that I was providing for them in my feeder. They weren't feeding any of the berries that were in the yard. Their diet, 100%, except for one exception, the goldfinch, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. We're feeding their young caterpillars, moths, crickets, katydids, insects that they're finding in the yard. So what's happening is the plants are soaking up that energy from the sun, and then the moth or butterfly is laying their eggs on that plant. And then when the egg hatch, the caterpillars eat that leaf. They take in the energy from the sun and they convert it to protein. And when the mama bird or daddy bird comes by and grabs that caterpillar and feeds it to their baby, they're taking that protein and converting it to muscle. So if you want a lot of birds in your backyard, especially baby birds, you've got to be able to provide them protein in the form of insects. And, the non-native plants that we get at garden centers our insects, our native insects don't recognize those plants as food. So the insects won't feed on them. And it doesn't support any life. So planting with native plants is important. This is a nest of cardinals. So you think of cardinals with those beaks, eating seeds, but when it comes to nesting, they have got to have protein in the form of insects to feed their babies. This is a house wren. She was a busy little beaver, bringing all sorts of insects from the yard and the garden to feed those babies. She's very fair about, depositing the insects one to another. So I end the video right here to show you just an example of why the baby's beak, why their mouth is ringed in yellow, and that gives mom and dad a target in that dark birdhouse to deposit those little insects. So and even hummingbirds. This is a picture of a hummingbird with an insect of some kind. Looks like could be a bee. Hummingbirds, we think of them at our nectar feeders drinking sugar water, but their primary diet, especially when they have young, are insects. So it's important to have a very healthy population of insects in your yard. These are 2 books by Dr. Doug Tallamy. The first one, To Bringing Nature Home, was life-changing for me. And I don't say that lightheartedly. I mean, it was a watershed moment for me to understand what I could do in my backyard to provide for nature. And Nature's Best Hope is the follow-up book to that one. So I recommend both of these books to help you understand the ecology of your backyard and how you can help. Attracting Birds, Butterflies, and Other Backyard Wildlife, another great book. And this is by Dave Mizejewski, who's the national spokesman for the National Wildlife Federation. Another great book on how, what you can do in your backyard to provide for birds. Now, this is my backyard in Matthews. And when it comes to feeding birds, variety is the most important. That's a pine warbler on suet. That's a downy woodpecker. The greater the variety of food that you offer, and the greater the variety of feeders that you offer it in, means the greater variety of birds you will have. Birds are like people. We all like something different. We all have different tastes. And we all have different needs, and by providing for them in a variety of ways, you will get a variety of wildlife. We are about to start the migration season right now. Oh, here's a catbird, speaking of migration, and here's a red-bellied woodpecker eating apples. Both of them love fruit. The catbird, they aren't here in the wintertime, but they are going to be coming soon. And here's a tray full of babies. That's a baby bluebird and a baby cardinal. So tray feeders, hopper feeders, and I'm gonna talk through all of these different feeders in a minute, but tray feeders, hopper feeders, mixed blends, peanuts, suet, fruit, all of these are appeal to different birds, and you need to put it in a variety of different feeders so that you get a great variety of birds. Here's a woodpecker feeder for just woodpeckers. This helps in the starling season and the grackle season. Starlings aren't very good at clinging, so this feeder helps feed just the woodpeckers and the nuthatches. That gray and white bird that you just saw is a white-breasted nuthatch. We have 2 nuthatches that are here year-round, the brown-headed nuthatch and the white-breasted nuthatch. Every now and then a third nuthatch will show up, and that's the red-breasted nuthatch. But and this is a downy woodpecker. And see how he's using his tail as leverage on that post. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that when we talk about specific feeders. And here is a way to offer protein to your birds. This is a mealworm feeder, and I'm putting out live mealworms. If you ring a bell or whistle, or what makes some noise that the birds will come to associate with worms, you can actually train them to come when you call. So I put out the birds. I usually like tap my spoon or I'll whistle so to get their attention. And that's Mama Bluebird. She's taken a mouthful of mealworms back to the babies in that box. It's a lot of fun to do. You can also get dried mealworms, but we really recommend during the nesting season that you use live mealworms, because the babies are stuck in that box. They are not able to go out and get a drink of water. So the only moisture that they are getting is in what is contained in the food that mom and dad brings. And so they're getting the nicest, juiciest insects that they can find in order to keep the moisture content for the baby. So using live mealworms, you don't have to use it year round, but using live mealworms is the best way. And of course, here's a Carolina wren. You got to share those mealworms with the other birds too, because in the nesting season, everybody, Carolina wrens, cardinals, catbirds, thrashers, everybody wants those mealworms. So they are delicious little morsels of protein. You'll see her.
Season when is that considered to start and end?
The nesting season has begun right now. I've got a lot of people talking about they already have eggs in their boxes. So for bluebirds, it's right now. Chickadees have already started, and it will last all the way through till about the end of July.
Wow.
So
no more dry mealworms for a little while, huh?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, I would wait until you can do it in the fall and winter, but right now I would use live mealworms. If you're interested specifically in bluebirds, some of the other foods that they like, they are insect eaters. They are not seed eaters. Their beaks are softer, so they can't crack shells. So the black oil sunflower seed is not really an option for them because they can't crack it, but they can eat the heart of the sunflower. So putting out mealworms, putting out suet, again, both of those very high in protein. Putting out berries, you can either plant berries in the form of bushes, or you can put out raisins for them. But what's real fun for bluebirds, if you can hire the bluebirds, so to speak. If you've got a blackberry patch or blueberry bushes that you have in your yard, and a lot of times it's frustrating because a lot of the birds will come and get the berries before you have a chance to. But if you'll put their bluebird house right in the middle of your blackberry patch or your blueberry patch, they're very territorial birds. So they will, he sits on top of that box and he guards his territory and he runs off other birds as they come close. And if you put it in the middle of your blueberry patch, he is kind of by default running birds out of the blueberry patch. You may have to pay him a few blueberries, but he will protect your blueberry patch from other birds. So these are their favorite foods: mealworm, suet, berries, and sunflower chips. Again, just the heart of the sunflower. Another way you can feed them is what we call a seed cylinder. It's a bunch of seed. You can even see some dried mealworms in there. It's stuck together with gelatin, very safe. And you can put that out for the bluebirds and they will eat that as well. So just another way to feed them. Here's a selection of hopper feeders and what we call a fly-through feeder. So the hopper feeders, they're gravity fed. You feed the seed from the top. There's a hopper or a container that keeps the seed dry, and then it comes out the bottom, gravity fed. And what's nice about a hopper feeder, if you're only going to have one feeder, do a hopper because it appeals to the widest variety of birds. That one on the top left has the suet cages on the end, so you could actually put a couple of suet cages there, and the woodpeckers would use it. Usually the platforms are a little bit bigger so that cardinals and bluebirds, larger birds that have a hard time with a perch, they can sit on the side of the platform. That one right in the middle is what we call a fly-through. It's basically a platform feeder with a roof on it. It will appeal to the greatest variety of birds. And what I like about a platform feeder is that you can make it a little smorgasbord, you know, put some seed in one corner, and you saw the video with, you know, the half of an apple in another corner, and you can put some suet nuggets or some mealworms in there or some raisins. So you can really put a nice variety of food to feed a greater variety of birds. So these are just some examples of hopper feeders. These are tube feeders. So tube feeders, just what they sound like. It's just a tube filled with seed. The one on the top right, that's the red-breasted nuthatch on that feeder, and that's peanuts. So you're filling it with peanuts, and the birds are picking pieces of the peanuts out. That appeals to woodpeckers, titmouse, nuthatch, you know, birds that can cling. So you notice that there's no perches on that. Other feeders will have a tray at the bottom, like the feeder on the top left. It doesn't have perches. It's a tray at the bottom. It's gravity fed. The seed comes out. That will appeal to a big variety of birds, including, again, those larger birds like the cardinals. And then the other feeders have tubes, and or little perches with a tube, and you know, those will appeal more to the smaller birds. The larger birds have a hard time with perches, but the smaller birds can use it. So again, having a nice variety that will be friendly to a different variety of birds, all sizes, is important. This is a window feeder. This is one of my favorite ways to feed the birds because it brings them so close. This is great to do with kids. It's also great to do with older people who may not be that active, and they're more sedentary and sitting at their kitchen table a lot. And this will bring the birds up really close. The pair of bluebirds, they had us trained very well, because when our kitchen light would come on in the morning, they would get right there. They knew that it was time for us to feed them the worms. Of course, there's Carolina wren. Here's a family of bluebirds that this is close to my window, but this is a family of bluebirds. And a lot of people don't realize that the family, the birds, you know, the 2 or 3 broods that hatch during the nesting season, they will stay together all winter. And by the end of the winter, you can't tell who are the juveniles and who are not. But in the spring, they will separate. Here's a mama thrasher. This is a platform feeder that sticks to your window. Here's a mama thrasher feeding the baby thrasher. Again, everybody loves the worms in the nesting season. You can hardly tell the difference between the mama and the baby, but you can tell by the behavior, the shimmering of the feathers. That's the signal for feed me, mama, feed me. So they're enjoying that. But a window feeder, also people get them for who have indoor cats, that we call it cat TV, because it'll keep the cat entertained, but you want to keep your cats indoors for this. And then baffles. How do you keep squirrels off? That's one of the most common complaints we have are squirrels, and how do you protect your feeders? And squirrel baffles, they attach to the pole. They keep the squirrels from climbing up the pole and getting to the feeders. If the squirrel can, once you stop them climbing up the pole, if the squirrel can go to a nearby tree or the corner of your deck or your air conditioning unit or whatever you may have in your yard and climb up it and jump, he will. So it's important for this to be effective that it be 10 to 12 feet away from anything that he can jump from. But if you can do that and you can get your squirrel baffle between 4 and 5 feet off the ground, it will be effective. And here's proof. This is, again, my yard in Matthews. And the squirrel climbs up, and the squirrel baffle is meant to move like that. It's meant to move so that he can't get a good grip on it. He'll try, though. You can hear him out there. You can hear that thing clanking around. That's a fly-through feeder on the top of that pole. And he eventually gives up. So they're very effective. He's persistent though. It's not as effective for snakes. Snakes are expert climbers, but it works very well for the squirrels. Raccoons are another challenge as well. And we usually recommend a very long cylindrical baffle under one of these types of baffles in order to stop the raccoons. But like snakes, with raccoons, there's really no guarantee. The best way, if you can't isolate your pole and get it away 10 feet and put a baffle on it, the best way to keep the squirrels off of it is to get a squirrel buster feeder. And there's a lot of different brands out there that that say they're squirrel proof. Squirrel buster feeders are the only ones that we sell now at the store because they're the only ones that we have found work all the time. They're also a great value. They're 100% guaranteed, and you don't have to just get them from me. You can buy them on Amazon or anywhere else, but they're guaranteed by the company. They're great to work with. The company, they're out of Canada, and these feeders work, and you'll save a fortune in seed if you just, for right off the bat, go with a squirrel proof feeder. But these are the different, there's 6 or 7 different models of squirrel proof feeders by Squirrel Buster. This is just a couple. So I highly recommend it. Again, getting a variety of them so that it appeals to the greatest variety of birds. And then these are, you can have fun with feeders. You can, you get pretty, you can get practical. We recommend practical. You want to make sure that you can clean them well. And I'll take this opportunity. Many of you have heard about the problems with the pine siskin and the goldfinch right now. They were calling it salmonellosis or something. And now I've heard that it may not be salmonella, but regardless of whatever it is, it's harming the pine siskin and the goldfinch. And so there's a couple of things you can do. Either clean your feeders every day, which is a pain. Another thing is is to bring your feeders in completely for a couple of weeks until the pine siskin leave. The pine siskin are a Canadian, they stay in Canada most of the time. This year, because of weather and food supply, they came farther south than they normally do, and they come in great numbers. Many of you are, reporting 40 and 50 and more at a time at your feeders. And when you get a large concentration of anything, birds included, when one gets sick, it can spread very easily. So they're asking, the Wildlife Commission is asking everybody to take in if you can't keep them cleaned every day, bring in your feeders until the pine siskin leave. They should be leaving in the next week or two. Another thing you can do if you can't stand the thought of not feeding your birds, or can't thought of cleaning it every day, is to take your seed and spread it on the ground. When it's spread, what the contact point is the point of where they spread the disease. And so if you're spreading it on the ground, there's not one common contact point. You can also, if you're cleaning your feeders frequently, in between the cleanings, go out with white vinegar and water on a paper towel and wipe the outside of your feeder down and wipe the ports and the perches down. That will also help from spreading the disease. But we've only got a week or two left of these pine siskins, so they'll move on soon. But here just is a nice variety. In the wintertime, that center suet feeder with the downy woodpeckers on it, suet is a source of protein, and in the wintertime, it is very hard to find protein because most of the insects are dormant. So winter really starts the suet season, and then because it is a protein replacement, and because it is protein is so important during the nesting season, it's very important to feed the suet right now. So by the end of July, August, you can bring your suet in, and you have a kind of a couple of months reprieve on it. But right now, put your suet out. And then we're going to talk about hummingbird feeders too. But this is a great example of, like, this is a platform feeder, and this is a flicker, it's a northern flicker. It used to be called a yellow shafted flicker. But this is a type of woodpecker. It's one of the few woodpeckers that migrate. And look at the tongue on this thing. This woodpecker is normally seen on the ground eating insects. That tongue goes down the hole and gets ants and other insects. But in the wintertime, when those insects are dormant, then he will actually come to a feeder, and I've got suet nuggets in that platform feeder, and that's what he's eating. But they're just absolutely gorgeous birds. And another really cool thing about woodpeckers is the tongue on the woodpecker. You see how far it goes out, but whenever it retracts it back into its mouth, it actually wraps around the back of its skull. And it provides a cushion, because woodpeckers are notorious for pecking on wood to find insects or to build a nesting box. And so this that tongue wraps around the outside of the brain, and it's like bubble wrap. It's cushion when he's whacking on wood. So I think that's just so cool about those birds. Ruby-throated hummingbirds, the only hummingbird that breeds here in North Carolina. Another example of, if you don't have a hummingbird feeder out, you're not going to get a hummingbird at a feeder. We recommend that you put your hummingbird feeder in a separate place from your songbird feeders. You do not want them to spend all their time trying to run the songbirds off. They're very territorial. So putting it, hanging it from a tree, putting it somewhere in the shade, preferably, so that it won't spoil as quickly, and using an ant trap. That red cup there above the feeder is filled with water, and ants won't cross water, so it keeps the ants from getting to the feeder. This is either a female or an immature male. The females and immatures look a lot alike. They don't have the ruby throat. The male was the only one with the ruby throat. So we recommend planting plants, again, to help feed them. The native columbine, it's blooming right now. It's one of the first flowers to greet the hummingbirds when they come. Carolina jessamine, also a native plant, and it also blooms early. And the crossvine and the buckeye, the hummingbird is the pollinator for these two plants. And so they're going to be blooming any day now, because they know the hummingbird is on its way. And then, of course, the coral honeysuckle, also native, red tubular shaped flowers, will feed the hummingbird all summer the nectar that they need. And then this is a trumpet vine. And you know, those of you here in Charlotte, you know that you see this running up telephone poles, and it's quite prolific in the area, and the hummingbird loves it. So this is pretty easy to get your hand on this vine. Two more hummingbird plants. This is a black and blue salvia, the one on the right. It's a cultivar. My sister gave me this plant years ago, and the hummingbirds just love it. And the plant on the left is a cardinal flower. Lobelia cardinalis. It likes wet feet if you've got that area, that situation in your garden, but it's a great hummingbird and butterfly flower. Two more hummingbird plants. These are annuals, salvia and pineapple sage. The pineapple sage is starting to because we're getting a little bit warmer in the winter, it'll last a mild winter, but these are two great hummingbird plants. And then it's best if you just make your own nectar, 4 parts water, 1 part white cane sugar. You can make a larger batch and keep it in your refrigerator for a couple of weeks, and please don't use any red dye. But keeping your nectar fresh is important. This time of year, when it's cooler and there's cool nights, you could probably get away with once a week. But when it starts getting warm, especially in July and August, it's going to be necessary to change that water, that nectar out regularly. And I'm talking every day, every other day, every 3 days, depending on the weather. So just keep your eye on it. You don't want to be offering your hummingbird spoiled water or spoiled nectar. So again, keeping it in the shade is important, keeping it separate from your songbird feeders, but most importantly, putting it somewhere where you can enjoy them, because they are such magnificent birds. This is just an example of a possum haul. This is another type of bird feeder. This is a tree that gets great berries. The cedar waxwing are going to be coming through the area right now, and they're going to be stripping the hollies and other berry producing bushes of their berries. So this is a great way. Planting a berry producer like this, a holly especially, is a great way to feed birds that won't come to your feeder, like the cedar waxwing. A couple of more flowers that are good nectar providers for all sorts of for insects, but then when it goes to seed, like the black-eyed Susan will as well, the seeds will actually feed the goldfinch. And you know, it's very satisfying to watch the goldfinch out there picking the seed heads out of the black-eyed Susan. It's also a great excuse to be kind of a lazy gardener. You don't need to deadhead the flowers the minute the blooms start fading. If you let them go to seed, it becomes a great bird feeder. So and this plant is so easy to grow, and it's almost impossible to kill. So having black-eyed Susan is a great way to feed the goldfinch in your yard. All right, water. So, all right, food, water, shelter, places to raise young. So just like food, having water in your yard in a variety of ways is important for everybody. This is a fountain that I had in my garden. Shallow is better when it comes to water. Also, moving water is better. The movement of the water attracts birds. The sound of the water attracts birds. This bottom bowl is not they can drink out of it, but it's not good for bathing. At this top, you can see I've put rocks in there to make it shallow as possible. The birds really want to feel safe. If you've got a bird bath and the birds aren't using it, if you'll put a rock in the middle of it that'll stick up above the water line, that will help. Garden ponds are really nice, and they don't have to be big. They can be small, but water's important not only for hygiene or hydration, but also for hygiene. So they need to be able to drink it, but they also need to be able to bathe, because they've got to keep those feathers clean. And even in the winter time, here's a couple of yellow rump warblers. So I know it's winter. That's a pine warbler. Even on cold days, they're out there bathing. And of course, having a little garden pond opens up a whole host of other wildlife that you can attract. But variety is important. So tall, close to the ground, so that everybody can use it. Again, different depths. If you've got a deep water, this is a deep bird bath right here, and I just don't fill it all the way up. Here's a little personal bird bath. Here's what I call the hanging puddle. There are pine siskin right there. There's a catbird. So again, variety is important. You can't have too many water features. And here's a box turtle after a rainstorm. And so he's not only hydrating, but what happens after it rains, right? All the worms come out of the ground. So he's out there eating as well. So we love variety. We love box turtles. We love variety of wildlife. And here's, again, just a variety of different water sources. Running water. This is a dripper on the right side. You hook it up to your tap, and it just drips. Again, the sound of water, that also makes sure that the water is getting replenished on a hot summer day. Here's a blue jay. This also has a dripper. You can see it there on the right side. Blue jays and robins are fabulous bathers. And this is one of my favorite water features. This is a mister. There's a brown-headed nuthatch. You run this mister up a tree. You hook it up to your tap, your hose tap. There's a hummingbird. Hummingbirds love these things. Hummingbirds love sprinklers too. But you run this up the tree, and it just sprays out a fine mist that collects on the leaves and the limbs. And they do what is called leaf bathing. They rub themselves on the leaves and limbs. And it's much cooler in there on a hot day. I recommend you putting it on a timer. It'll come on. I recommend mine comes on around 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So you get it at the heat of the day, and the birds just flock, pardon the pun, but they flock to that tree and they wait for that mister to come on, and everybody does. So it just, there's not holding any water, so it's not a mosquito issue. But fresh water every day is important for the birds, but it's also important that you put fresh water out regularly so that you don't grow mosquitoes. So it takes 3 days from the laying of the mosquito egg before it will emerge as a mosquito. So if you're every other day, if you're emptying your bird bath and putting in fresh water, you're breaking that cycle and you're not hatching mosquitoes. Bird bath placement is important. Just making sure that birds are vulnerable when they're wet. So we don't want, cats or other predators to be able to hide. Here's another garden pond, couple of examples. Again, they don't have to be big. These are water wigglers. Moving water is important. The water wigglers on the left, it just jiggles the water. And on the right is a solar fountain that you can put in your bird bath. And there's a great picture of a robin. And then even in the wintertime, they've got to have water. So you can use bird bath heaters in your bird bath, and it will keep the water from freezing. It doesn't heat it up. It just keeps it above 35 degrees. And here's just an example. How bad do I feel that robin can't get the water out of there? But just again, examples that the birds really you need the water 365 days a year, even on the coldest of days. So you'll see a robin here in a second taking a nice bath in all that snow. Birds are very well adapted to cold. They can survive really cold temperatures, but they can't survive dirty feathers. So all right, we're on to cover and places to raise young. And this is, I kind of combine these because they're very similar. They could be used for both. So birds are either cavity nesters or they're open nesters. So cavity nesters, they're going to use nesting boxes. They're going to use cavities in trees. And then open nesters, they'll use tall grasses. They'll use evergreen bushes. They'll use other types of bushes. They'll use the shoes in your garage in the case of the Carolina wren. I mean, they're notorious for building in the most inconvenient places. So covering places to raise young, again, variety is important. Here's some Mallard Ducks, very important. They like the tall grasses around ponds. Brush piles act as a place to raise young for a lot of animals, but it's also cover. And they become their own little ecosystems. Brush piles will attract the rotting wood, attracts the insects, and then the insects attract the birds. And so it becomes its own little ecosystem. And here's just some of examples of nooks and crannies and brush piles in my garden. When a tree falls, we just cut it up and leave it right there. So there's all sorts of cool places for insects and birds and other critters to be. Stacks of rocks. This is some broken pottery. So you can just put it under the leaf litter. And leaf litter is important. It's considered a place to raise young because lightning bugs, for example, they need undisturbed leaf litter in order to go through their life cycle. So by stopping raking your leaves and leaving it natural, you're helping lightning bugs. And of course, the insects in there also provide food for the birds. A snag left for nesting cavities. A snag is just basically a dead tree. And I know we can't all leave dead trees in our yard, but if you can leave part of a dead tree in your yard, it becomes a feeding station for woodpeckers and other birds. And it also becomes home to some animals like the possum and the raccoon and the pileated woodpecker, or pileated, depending on how your mama taught you to say it. So the nesting cavities are important. And then the biggest bird in the area using a nesting cavity is the barred owl. The great horned owl doesn't use, they use an open nest, but the barred owl use a nesting cavity, but they can't build their own cavity. So they're looking for cavities that are either naturally occurring or an old pileated woodpecker hole that they can use. So you can actually put up a barred owl box. There's a that's one of our customers. His box he bought from us has mama in it, and then on the right side is one of the little owlets. But just a great project to watch. Too late this year to put up an owl box, but we recommend you put them up between Thanksgiving and Christmas. But all sorts of man-made nesting cavities, the size of the hole is going to determine who gets to use that box. A Bluebird box, this is a picture perfect Bluebird box. It's 1.5-inch hole, it's got a predator guard around it, it's got a nice ventilation at the top. But other birds will use a Bluebird box like this nest of brown-headed nuthatches. Another thing you can put out for the birds is, this is actually, I think, alpaca fur, or this might be dog hair fur. We recommend don't put out any synthetic materials. You can put out organic cotton. You can put out, you can buy alpaca fur. If you don't treat your dog hair, you can put the dog or cat hair out, but don't put out string, don't put out yarn, don't put out lint from your dryer, nothing like that. Just only what birds would have found in nature anyway. And then finding a safe place for nesting boxes. This stuck in those bushes right there, all sorts of predators will be able to get to it. Nailing it to a tree is not a good thing, because not only does it hurt the tree, but the predators will be able to get to it very easily. So putting it on a pole, putting it in an open area. Mama's not going to call those babies out of the box if she sees a cat or a hawk nearby. So putting it in an open area where she can see the predators. Also putting a baffle on it. These are examples of roosting boxes. So roosting boxes, if you'll notice, they have the hole on the bottom so that it's the birds enter from the bottom and go up. That keeps them from piling on top of each other. There's usually perches on the inside. In some roosting boxes, like the one on the upper left, you can take that door off and turn it around and put the hole on the top during the nesting season. The perches are removable, and then they can use it as a nesting box. And then in the fall, what we call flip the lid back over, put the hole in the bottom, put the perches back in, and they will be able to use it safely in the wintertime as a roosting box. So that's kind of a fun thing to do. And then of course, bats aren't really birds, but we do need bats in the environment. They're excellent insect control, and giving them a place to be is important. And this is a bat house in Florida that that's my mom, that holds 100,000 bats, 100,000 bats. And at sundown every day, those bats come screaming out of there to go hunt and eat mosquitoes. It was an amazing thing. But what was really cool is, and you can be able to see on the top right, you see that owl coming in. So we had an owl come in, we had a hawk come in, we had a fox come in, because sundown meant dinner time for them. You know, if I hadn't have been there, they would have been feasting on some bats. So I think we are coming to the end here. Just to recap, in order to have a safe place for birds, cut down on the amount of pesticides or other chemicals you're using in the yard. Get rid of some of your grass. I'm not naive enough to think we'll get rid of all of our grass, but grass really doesn't do anything for birds. But filling that space with native plants, a lot of mulch, a lot of leaf litter will really appeal to the birds. Again, cutting down on the amount of chemicals that you're using, planting with native plant. That's our coral honeysuckle. Embracing your bugs. I know a lot of us don't like insects, but insects are important. They're the little things that make the world go round and round. And they're one of the things that feed birds. So we really have to have insects in the yard. Cardinals, that's the state bird for North Carolina. You know, if you learn the different birds, get a good bird guide and learn how to name them so they'll become your friends. And of course, water conservation. Support the North Carolina Wildlife Federation and Marsh, of course. And I'm going to go jump ahead here and give you my contact information. All right, so here I am. This is my email, my phone number at the store, and I also have a website that has called smelllikedirt.com, and it has a lot of these videos on how to provide for birds and other critters in your yard. So like I say, I feel like I'm talking a lot, and you're drinking from the fire hose here, so I'm going to stop and field questions since we only have about 10 minutes left. So
we have a lot of questions too. So I've gone through some of them because you covered a lot of them. But there were some questions about suet, and okay, I've lost them now. Sorry. Let me go back. Let me find them again. Excuse me. Well, I'm trying to. I can't see. There it is. There it is. Sorry. So someone says that someone else suggested leftover cooking grease that you can put that uncooked rolled oats, I can't even say that, in the oil. Is that safe for the birds?
Yes. So a cool thing to do with all that bacon grease that you've got and you don't know what to do with. And I recommend animal fat, not like canola oil or any of that, because a lot of that is really processed. But yes, so it's again a source of protein. So saving all that bacon fat and then mixing in rolled oats. You can also mix in grits. Wheat germ is another thing. Is as least processed as you can find, and kind of make it into a cake. And yes, absolutely, put it out there. The birds will gobble it up.
Well, that's a good reason to make bacon.
I know, and we all
really need one.
Bacon, right? Yes.
Okay, then what about no melt suet? Is that a good or bad thing?
All right. So the difference between suet, you've got. Hang on. You've got regular suet, and then you've got never melt suet. And the difference is suet is rendered lard. It is animal fat. In the regular suet, or we call fully leaded, this is made mostly with rendered lard. But the one thing about rendered lard is it's fat, so it melts easily. The never melt suet, it gets its protein primarily from peanuts. So it'll hold up better in July and August. So right now, and especially through the nesting season, I would go with the fully leaded. There's more protein and there's more calories in the fully leaded. And then in July and August, when they don't need the protein as much because there's a lot of insects in there, then go with the never melt. Another way you can keep squirrels off your suet is to use hot pepper suet. So, birds aren't like mammals, so they don't have the saliva and taste buds like we do, but squirrels do. So it's very effective. The suet mixed with the hot pepper, they put cayenne in it. Squirrels take one bite and that's it. They won't eat it.
And they can learn, the little squirrels. They can learn.
Yeah, and we call those Cajun squirrels. When they really like the cayenne, we call them Cajun.
Well, what are you going to do? So one of the ladies asked about a holly tree that she has that needs to be cut down. It's gotten too big for the space it's in, but it clearly is a place that birds live. And she's wondering, when should she do that? We've had a long ongoing conversation over here on the side about this. And so is it worth waiting until later in the season when the birds are done nesting and then cut it down and replace it? And she's pretty much sure she's going to replace it with another holly. So just something smaller this time.
Yeah, I would wait. You know, it breaks my heart this time of year when I see them clearing a bunch of land, because I think of all the nests that are in those trees. So, and fall is the best time to plant as well. I mean, most people think spring, but fall for shrubs and trees, fall is the best time. So I would wait. And then late in the year, after the nesting season is over, cut it down and then replace it with the new one. And then that new one will have a head start on the next season.
Exactly. So another question, talking about owl boxes, if we put an owl box out, will we just be giving the owl a salad bar over there with the songbirds that we are feeding?
Hey, cycle of life.
Cycle of life. I knew you were going to say that.
Yeah. So, you know, and people call, feeding station a two-stage hawk feeder or a two-stage owl feeder. With the owls don't eat as many birds as people think they do, because they're hunting at night, and birds aren't really active at night. So they're eating more mice and bunnies and crawdads and the stuff, because they really hunt, in the next to a stream or near water as well. Hawks, however, especially Cooper's hawk, they'll eat a lot of hawks or a lot of birds. Sharpshins will also, and that's just part of it. I mean, if you put up a bunch of bird feeders and you're attracting all that activity to the feeders, it will usually catch the attention of a hawk. But I would rather a hawk eat my bluebird than my neighbor's cat. So
yeah, good point, because the hawk is supposed to be there.
Right, exactly.
I mean, I have a cat. She lives in the house, so I
Right.
is not a cat hater by any stretch.
That's a whole nother discussion.
Yeah, no, we probably should have that presentation, shouldn't we? Boy, that might not know. Anyway, can you put your contact information back up again?
Oh, sure.
Since I would type it into the chat box, but I can't remember all of it. And while you're thinking about that, one last question. Can you use lard that is purchased for suet? Do you mean for human consumption, Julia?
And the question is, yes, you can. So you can, in fact, a lot of people make their own suet, and they just go to a meat market, a butcher, and say, I want your lard. And you can, again, and there's tons of recipes online. But I've seen recipes that call for sugar. I would not add any sugar. I'd stick with as least processed as possible. Suet, and then mixing it in with oats or steel cut oatmeal, grits. You can put fruit in there if you want to mix in some dried mealworms. You want to mix in some peanut butter, you can do that, or crunchy peanut butter. But again, get a peanut butter that doesn't have a lot of other crap in it.
Well, it doesn't have sugar in it. Yeah, and it's easy enough to find peanut butter that doesn't have sugar.
So I have another question, because the recipe I had, and I hadn't made it, used lard that they purchased at Costco. And I'm sort of nervous about that. I make my own bone broth, and I have a lot of fat from my bone broth that I could take, and can I use that if I can't find good lard?
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. So I'll start saving my bone broth, because I make it every week. I make bone broth.
Oh, okay.
So do we
Great.
have any more questions, guys? This was awesome. We have lots of thank yous, and this was great kind of comments. So that's always nice.
Oh, well, and I love in these presentations. So I'm happy to do it anytime. And I'm at Wildology tomorrow, and then I'm at Birdhouse on Thursday and Friday. So you can call me, drop by, whatever. I'm happy to help however I can.
Awesome.
Great. Thank you,
guys.
Thank you, Carol.
On YouTube really soon. Thank you.
I enjoy listening to you.
Thanks for joining us, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.